You think no contact is strength. But if you're still checking your phone, still replaying memories, still hoping she'll regret leaving, then your silence is just another way of holding on. And she can sense it. Women always know when a man is pretending to be done but still emotionally tied to them. That's why no contact doesn't shake her. She feels your attachment even when you say nothing. But here's the twist. When that emotional thread finally snaps, when you detach for real, everything changes. She feels it instantly. She starts questioning her choice. She starts wondering who you're becoming. And that shift doesn't happen through distance. It happens through indifference. If you're ready for the strategy that turns the tables, stay right here, because this is where the power starts. Before we dive in, take a moment to ask yourself something real. If she could feel exactly what you feel right now, would she see strength, or would she see a man trying to look strong? Would she sense clarity or desperation dressed as discipline? The answer is important because what you're about to learn only works when you stop negotiating with your own denial. If you're ready to face yourself honestly, hit like and subscribe. Now, let's uncover the point where everything silently began to unravel. There's a moment every man remembers. The moment everything breaks at once. 1 second. He thought the connection was real, solid, something he could lean on. And then, without warning, it collapsed. No long conversation, no explanation, just a short message that felt colder than winter on bare skin. He kept rereading it as if somewhere between the lines he'd find a clue, a mistake, anything that made it make sense. But nothing did. What came after wasn't just sadness. It was the kind of emotional freefall that steals the air out of your lungs. The apartment felt emptier than it had any right to be. Songs he used to enjoy suddenly felt weaponized. Even silence felt loud. And every night when exhaustion hit, there was this urge, almost instinctive, to grab the phone, not to write anything, just to check, just to feel connected to something that was already gone. So he did what everyone told him to do. Delete her number, unfollow her, disappear for a while, go no contact. People made it sound like a magic button. Press it, and suddenly she'd miss him. Suddenly she'd regret everything. But inside, nothing changed. His body was quiet. His mind wasn't, because even though he wasn't calling, he was waiting. Even though he wasn't texting, he was hoping. Even though he wasn't looking at her profile, he was imagining what she might be posting. She wasn't in his phone anymore, but she was still running the show in his head. And that's the part men never say out loud. No contact wasn't giving him power. It was making him a prisoner with invisible walls. Women feel that. They always do. They don't need to see your messages to know you're still emotionally orbiting them. You can vanish from the screen, but if you're still anchored to her emotionally, she senses it. And to her, silence filled with longing isn't strength. It's surrender. That's the truth every man eventually has to face. No contact can save you if she's still the center of your emotional gravity. So let me ask you something and be honest with yourself. Are you truly silent? Or are you just trying to hold back the scream? Most men walk into no contact with a quiet fantasy playing in the back of their minds. The moment she realizes you're gone, the moment she checks her phone and feels that sting of absence, the moment she panics because silence suddenly feels heavier than words. It's a comforting thought. It makes you feel like time is secretly working in your favor. But here's the uncomfortable truth. Silence by itself doesn't shake her, not if she can still feel that you're emotionally tied to her. Women don't respond to what you do. They respond to where your energy is anchored. If you're waiting, she feels it. If you're hoping, she senses it. If you're imagining the day she comes back, she knows it without needing proof. And when she knows that, your silence isn't a statement. It's background noise. It doesn't create urgency. It doesn't activate loss. It doesn't shift power. It simply confirms what she already believes, that you're still right there emotionally, even if you've gone mute physically. That's why no contact often backfires. You think you're creating distance, but you're really just creating time. Time she uses to settle deeper into her decision. This is the part where most men get blindsided. A few weeks pass, maybe a month, then out of nowhere she drops a small breadcrumb, a casual, "How have you been?" A reaction to a story, a like on an old photo, a message that means nothing and yet makes your heart race. You think it's a sign. You think she's softening. You think the silence worked, so you respond with a little too much enthusiasm, a little too much speed, a little too much hope leaking through your words. And instantly, even if she never says it out loud, she registers the truth. You were only pretending to move on. And just like that, she relaxes. She's reassured. She confirms that you're still an option she can return to any time, which means she doesn't have to return at all. This is why no contact isn't the real strategy, because the real strategy isn't about what you stop doing, it's about what you stop needing. Silence alone doesn't change anything. Your intention does. No contact is powerful only when you expect nothing from it. But if you're using it to wait for her message, you all read. Lost before you even started. There comes a point where a man finally understands that the real shift isn't about cutting her off. It's about cutting her out of the equation entirely. Not in a bitter way, not in a dramatic way, but in a way that quietly rewrites the architecture of his life. This is the moment where everything changes, because this is where you stop thinking in terms of strategies and start thinking in terms of identity. Silence is easy. Anyone can stop talking for a few days. Anyone can hide behind distance and call it strength. But silence still carries emotional residue. Silence still trembles. Silence still waits. Indifference doesn't. Indifference is the absence of emotional gravity. It's what happens when she's no longer the center point your mood orbits around. It's the difference between acting like you're done and actually being done. And women can feel the difference instantly. This isn't about punishing her. This isn't about making her worry. And it's definitely not about creating some dramatic comeback story. This is about rewriting how you move. Indifference means you stop checking her profile, not because you're forcing yourself, but because the curiosity evaporates. Indifference means you stop asking mutual friends about her, not out of discipline, but out of disinterest. Indifference means you stop imagining a future with her, not out of pain, but because that mental space now belongs to something meaningful. When your intention shifts, your energy shifts. And when your energy shifts, she loses the ability to read or predict you. That's when she truly feels the distance, not the silence you imposed, but the emotional space you created. Here's the part most men miss. You can't fake this. You can't perform indifference. You can't force it with affirmations or pretend you don't care when you're still sitting there refreshing her profile. At midnight. Indifference isn't an act. It's the natural result of deciding that your life moves forward with or without her approval. When she matters less, everything else starts to matter more. Your goals, your standards, your peace. And that's exactly what she never expects. Your world expanding without her in it. No contact might spark her curiosity, but indifference makes her lose you completely. When men talk about moving on, they usually talk about what they stopped doing. Stop texting, stop calling, stop checking her stories, but the real reason they stay stuck isn't what they're doing on the outside, it's what's still happening on the inside. You can delete every trace of her and still live inside the same emotional cage. That's why so many guys fail with no contact. They never rebuild the internal system that collapsed in the first place. The first step of that rebuild is emotional disentanglement. It means separating what you feel from what you expect. Most men experience emotions as a scoreboard. If she texts me, I feel good. If she doesn't, I feel worthless. But that's not emotion, that's dependency dressed up as love. Emotional disentanglement teaches you to let feelings exist without letting them steer you. You can miss her without surrendering to the missing. You can feel the pull without following it. The second step is pattern awareness. Heartbreak has rituals, micro-behaviors you repeat without even noticing. Checking your phone every 10 minutes, imagining her walking back through some imaginary door, replaying conversations and rewriting them in your head. These patterns drain your mental bandwidth and keep her occupying space she no longer earns. When you start noticing the patterns, you start interrupting them. An interruption is the first crack in attachment. Then comes the identity shift, the hardest but most important part. It's the moment you stop seeing yourself as the man who was left and start becoming the man who doesn't beg for breadcrumbs. It's when you stop defining your worth based on whether someone stays or goes. You don't need to become emotionless. You just need to become selective. Not every feeling deserves the dignity of your full attention. Practical steps help. Writing down your triggers, replacing phone checking with small grounding habits, telling yourself out loud if necessary, she does not get to decide how I feel today. These aren't tricks. They are tools that retrain your nervous system to stop reacting from fear and start acting from self-respect. And something powerful happens when your emotions detach from the outcome. Your presence shifts. You become calmer, clearer, steadier. People feel it. Women especially feel it. You don't heal to win her back. You heal so you never again become the version of yourself who would chase someone walking away. At some point in every man's comeback, there's a shift you can't fake. A moment when the rebuilding stops being emotional and starts becoming physical, visible, undeniable. Because identity isn't just mindset. Identity is expressed through how you move, how you speak, how you look, how you choose your environment, and the standards you enforce without saying a word. This is where your evolution stops living in your head and starts showing up in the real world. The first pillar is your body. Not because muscles win her back, but because discipline wins you back. A stronger body regulates stress, stabilizes hormones, sharpens your focus. Every rep you push becomes a quiet rewrite of identity. I don't break here. You're not training to impress her. You're training to stop collapsing under the weight of your own emotions, and that internal steadiness becomes the foundation of everything else you build. The second pillar is your lifestyle. Heartbreak has a way of shrinking your world, making everything feel small and repetitive. Reversing that requires expansion, new routines, new skills, new environments, new ambitions. You start leveling up your work, tightening your circle, setting higher goals, not because you want to flaunt progress, but because your future demands a better framework. The more your life fills with purpose, the less room your past has to occupy. Then comes presence, the intangible element that ties it all together. Presence is posture without tension, eye contact without neediness, confidence without noise. It's the vibe of a man who doesn't chase approval because he already lives by his own standards. And if there's one thing women sense instantly, it's that they're not drawn to bulk or aesthetics. They're drawn to a man who stands firmly in himself, whose life has direction instead of drift. And this is where she begins to feel the loss. Not because you're trying to provoke it, but because she sees a version of you she never expected. The man who didn't just survive the breakup but transcended it. The man she underestimated. The man she no longer has access to. You don't need to prove a transformation. Your life speaks it for you. There's a different kind of power that shows up once a man stops needing validation from her or anyone else. It's quiet, it's controlled. And it's subtle enough that most people can't immediately explain why they feel it, but women feel it more sharply than anyone. It's the power of a man who no longer performs for the world, who no longer broadcasts his feelings or hides behind dramatic gestures. It's the power of a man who moves in silence. This doesn't mean blocking her out of anger or erasing your past like it never happened. That kind of reaction is loud, and loud reactions reveal emotional residue. Silent domination is the opposite. You don't block her. You simply stop giving her any emotional signal to read. You don't unfollow her. You just stop consuming anything tied to her. You don't post quotes about hurt or strength or rebirth. You let your life speak without commentary. And slowly your online presence shifts not into a highlight reel crafted to trigger her, but into something more grounded, intentional, and mysterious. You post less often, but with more clarity. A photo from a new environment, a moment with new people, a quiet accomplishment, no dramatic captions, no implied messages, no breadcrumbs for her to decode. This is where female psychology kicks in. Women are incredibly attuned to emotional patterns. When she can no longer predict your reactions, she starts paying closer attention. When she can no longer read your energy, she starts trying to access it again. And when you show up selectively, present but unreadable, you create the one thing that pulls at a woman's mind harder than attraction. Curiosity. Curiosity turns into overthinking. Overthinking becomes obsession. And obsession inevitably becomes regret, not because you're taunting her, Not because you're performing a comeback, but because your absence doesn't feel like retreat. It feels like evolution. You're still in the world, but you're no longer accessible. You're living, but not explaining. You're moving, but not signaling. She sees a life unfolding that she's no longer part of, and the realization hits deeper than silence ever could. You didn't disappear. You outgrew the version of you she thought she understood, and she no longer has the right to access the man you've become. It always happens eventually. Maybe weeks later, maybe months. Sometimes right when you've stopped thinking about her entirely. It's rarely dramatic. In fact, it's almost always subtle. So subtle that if you weren't the man you are now, why, you'd mistake it for fate, or closure, or a second chance. It might be a like on a photo she ignored when you first posted it. A reaction to a story she has no real reason to react to. A random, hey, how have you been? Or a nostalgia drop. Remember that place we used to go? These tiny gestures feel harmless, but they're not random. Women don't reach out without intent. And most of the time, that intent isn't longing, it's confirmation. She's not checking if she wants you back. She's checking if she still could. She wants to know whether the door she once walked out of is still unlocked, whether you're still emotionally available, whether you're still an option. Before your transformation, you would have jumped at this moment. Your pulse would spike, your hopes would inflate, and your mind would sprint into fantasy. But you're not that man anymore. There are two versions of you now, both equally strong. The first version is the man who feels absolutely nothing when she reaches out. Not anger, not excitement, just neutrality. He reads the message and simply doesn't feel compelled to respond. Not as a tactic, not as a power play, but because the chapter truly closed. His silence isn't a test. It's his truth. The second version is the man who's healed enough to respond, but from a place of grounded calm. He answers politely, briefly, without giving her emotional oxygen. He doesn't ask questions. He doesn't reopen old doors. He doesn't feed her curiosity. His tone says, I'm good, and the lack of details makes it clear he's not inviting a continuation. In both cases, the shift is unmistakable. You're no longer reacting from desire, fear, or hope. You're responding or not responding from center. This is what she never expects. She thought her reappearance would stir something in you. Instead, she's the one left wondering. She's the one decoding. She's the one feeling the imbalance that used to be yours. You don't win when she comes back. You win when her return no longer matters. You've walked through every stage of the fall and every stage of the rise. From the first shock of being left behind to the silence that felt like punishment, to the slow, steady rebuilding of a man who refuses to stay broken. You went from being emotionally trapped inside the memory of her to reclaiming your power piece by piece. Not through games, not through waiting, but through choosing yourself in a way you never had before. And somewhere along that path, the truth finally revealed itself. Your worth was never supposed to be determined by who stayed or who walked away. You were never meant to chase someone who made you doubt your own value. The point was never to make her regret losing you. The point was to become the version of yourself she never could have kept. Because that's what this strategy really is. Not silence, not performance, not a trick to lure her back. It's evolution. It's stepping into a life where she's no longer the reference point for your emotional state. Where her attention doesn't sway your direction, where her absence doesn't shape your identity. You didn't just move on, you moved up. You grew out of the chapter she belonged to. She may look back one day expecting the man she left behind. But by then you'll be somewhere she can't reach mentally, emotionally, and in every way that matters. She was a meaningful chapter. Yes, but you are the entire book. And your story doesn't freeze on the page she walked out on. If you're ready to keep rising into the strongest version of yourself, tap that like button, hit subscribe, and comment, I choose my power. Because this is where we build men, not fantasies. And from here on out, the only person who gets to define your destiny is you.